Hi, Pattie Simone here with the FlipReport, and I'm speaking with Perri Gorman, who is Be the Butterfly, and she just finished giving a workshop at Realtime, New York. We're at B.B. King's Club, which is getting a really good turnout right here today, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she spoke about, but also what's up with her business. So thank you for taking the time.
It's great to see you, and I was really happy to see the video that we shot, and it was interesting because I hadn't seen it in a while, and a lot of what I talked about today was what I talked about in that video last year. So what I talked about today was the principle of using these tools in a real-time networking way that allows people to kind of get to their end goal of networking. So I think a lot of people are overwhelmed by the mass amounts of tools, and they're not necessarily sure, A, which tools to use, but also B, how to make those connections real. Like, so that they're talking on Twitter, or they're using Hashable, or they're looking at different events and meeting people in real life, but then actually taking those connections to a real business, or not even, it doesn't necessarily have to be business, but like, what are we doing together? Like, what's the next step? How are we making this something that's more meaningful than just like, hi, how are you?
So tell us, because I know that there's a lot of people who are in that I don't know what to do with all this data stage.
Well, I think the points that I really tried to emphasize today were, it's sort of like my cycle of networking, and it really starts out with research. So, for instance, if you came to this event today, one of the things would be to look at who is coming and research who's coming, and it would make your networking here at this event more effective. If you knew a month ago that you were coming to this, maybe that you made a list on Twitter of all the people that were registered, and you could start watching what they were talking about and perhaps start to engage with them in conversation, knowing that you had an opportunity to meet them coming up. Again, even if you were here and you maybe didn't meet everybody that you wanted to, take that, make a list, start watching the conversation. So first it's the research, like who do you want to talk to, what kind of people do you want to talk to. Then it's the watching and the listening, knowing who's in the room, which is something I said last year. Then figuring out how to make that first approach. So it's not standing in the corner handing out your business cards to everybody. It's figuring out that thing that you're going to say, like Laura Fitton talked about today in her opening, which was like the schnauzer, like, oh, I like schnauzers too. You know, find that just that small piece of common casual something that starts the conversation and gets you to the next level. The next thing I would say is, after the approach, is the actual connection, like, and taking it offline. So, meaning you're not going to do business in the Twitter stream, right? You need to use that for conversation, getting to know people, and then you can move that on to whether it's a phone call, a meeting, a Skype, you know, some other kind of email, etc., to make it a richer connection, and then following through with that and seeing how far you can take it. I mean, sometimes you might be able to, take it so far and then nothing comes of it, but then you can keep that relationship on the back burner and say, you know what, there's nothing for us to do right now, but maybe later, and then you keep in touch. It's that follow-up.
So for the people who have 25,000 followers, okay, you can't possibly listen, because I know that's one of the key things that people were saying today is it's all about listening.
Yes.
Victoria Harris said that as well from PR Newswire. But you can't possibly listen to that amount of dialogue going on and do your job.
No.
So for an entrepreneurial standpoint, what are your tips for managing your workflow and really leveraging the connections that you think are valuable into that next step of picking up the phone, making a meeting, etc.?
I think there are two things. I think number one, Twitter is still my number one thing that I use when I want to meet new people. Right now, for instance, and I'll give you an example of what's going on in my life. I have been a headhunter in financial services for many, many years, but I left the business. I came back when I came back to New York, but I've also started to get involved in the startup scene in New York, and I have met a number of investors, and I'm a natural connector, so I'm like, why shouldn't I start putting these people together? People looking for investments, people looking for money, like, why not? It's not so far away from what I've always done. So, in order to sort of bolster that, I have been watching the VC and startup community. So I've been researching, okay, so, who are the VCs? Who are the startup companies? And then I have a Twitter list, and I watch and I follow and I see who's speaking to who. I go to events. I try and, there was someone who I saw on Hashable, for instance, and he worked at a VC, and I tried tweeting him once and said, I'd love to meet you for coffee. He might have missed it. We didn't connect that time. Then I went to an event where he was speaking, and he actually noticed me. And then I tweeted him and said, I'd really love to meet you. And then we did meet for a drink. And then we've connected on a couple of different things. And where that will go, I don't know. But it was a combination of, I knew I wanted to meet him, and I needed to find the right time or place and method of conversation in order to make that happen. But you have to know. You have to, take a list of people that's maybe 200 people that you can watch. Because, you can't watch 25,000 people.
No.
So I watch this list, and then I also watch who they're talking to. And then you figure out, okay, well, they know, okay, that guy knows someone I know. Okay, so let me get involved in that conversation. That's interesting. And then sometimes, after watching someone, I'll give you a really funny example. I saw a tweet of a venture capitalist who wrote a blog. I saw his blog post that took me to another blog post, and instead of responding to the guy's blog post on his comments, I tweeted him. And he wrote me back and said, oh my God, you know my friend Jonathan, who was my roommate in college. And I said, wow. And he's like, oh, and I happen to be in New York tonight. Why don't you come meet me? And then he introduced me to the CEO of this other company of Reportive, which is who I presented today as well as a tool. So it's just you just have to be in there.
Well, it's tangible that things can happen. It's not just about just talking. It's tangible, making things happen.
It's definitely tangible. But it's exciting because you also don't really know what's going to unfold. You have to just have a little bit of discipline and a little bit of faith that the work that you're putting in is going somewhere, even if you don't know where you're going.
Well, it's just like cold calling. Yeah. I mean, it's like any avenue that you decide to pursue. You have to pursue it to a certain point, and then you make that judgment call. Is this worth it? Or do you move on to the next person? Is it something that you might be able to help that person, like what you're doing with, connecting people? And then you make that judgment call and you move on.
Exactly. And I always think, I said today in my thing that you do not want to be building a network when you need it. You need to be building a network all the time, because if you wait until, let's say, you need that job or that piece of business, it doesn't present you with the same kind of opportunity to get to know people in an organic, casual way, where then when there's that moment of oh yes, you know what, I think you probably could help me, you already know them. And then same thing about, being able to help them. So I think the reason why these tools are good is because they are immediate, they are real time, they are, you have to be consistent day in and day out in order for them to work for you.
So what is your business now, and how can people find out more about you? How do you make your living? I know I asked you that the last time.
Well, no, I mean, in all honesty, this past year, I had done a startup in Hong Kong, and then I left Hong Kong. I came back to headhunting and financial services just because you need to do something. While I was trying to figure out where my next thing in New York is going to be. I have a startup that I'm working on in my mind. I've been talking to a couple of people about it. There's some interest around it, but I can't say anything about it yet. As well as starting to make more introductions between startups and angels. It's something that I'm really interested in doing and being part of.